Welcome to the Tea Grannies. I'm Elise.
And I'm Maria. Today we're here for a Q&A about traditional publishing with author Rob Samborn. So pour yourself a cup of tea and let's get started.
An emerald green beam of light tore across the sky, and Rita sprang to her feet on the rooftop, overcome with awe and an uncanny suspicion that the light was staring back. She traced it arcing above the moon, swelling brighter and brighter like a fallen star burning up far away from its home, until blip, it disappeared in a flash at the edge of her hand. The night went on undisturbed, as if nothing had happened. A whisper escaped her lips. Wow. Something new had entered her life without an invitation. This was news she needed to share with the only other person living in gossip's distance. She scanned the ground until she spotted a bunch of straggly hair, not unlike a bird's nest, standing out with its paleness from the surroundings. There you are. She took the slope of the roof, with kitty cat steps to its edge, where, grabbing hold of the gutters, she swooped in through her window. Yes! She pumped her fist in the air upon landing. 10 out of 10. A dash down a flight of stairs, a couple of leaps through a cramped hallway, and there she stood, right at the front door. It slid back with a hiss to reveal a jalopy and a trailer attached to it, parked in their rusted glory. Bobbing behind and along the side of the trailer, the blonde hair swayed in the brisk summer breeze, in every imaginable direction, until its owner, a paunchy man, stepped out into view. He was grinning from ear to ear, an expression that, on any other face, would have looked absolutely horrifying. Dad, did you see that? Rita enthused between gasps for air. See what, Pumpkin? Her dad said in a jolly voice. The fireworks? 'Twas a pretty one, eh? Color of your eyes. A tad brighter, now that I think of it. But fireworks are supposed to be bright, otherwise what's the point of them? That was no fireworks. They don't go that high. It wouldn't be so bad. It's just, I don't know. I had this strange feeling that it was looking at me. Perhaps it was, Rita's dad mused.
All right, so there's a lot I liked about this submission, but I don't feel anchored in the story yet. I thought the descriptions were super. A fallen star burning up far away from home. Those kind of descriptions were awesome. I feel like the beam of light in the very first sentence there is supposed to be very important to the story, and I'd like a few more beats about that before she goes off to her dad to tell him about it. Especially because, it could just be an opener, but I feel like it's probably part of the story, and I'd like to have a little more importance tied to it. And I did like the description, uncanny suspicion, but this is one of those moments where I felt like we could use a feel for that instead of being told that, especially since we're just getting into the story. But yeah, overall, I think we need more direction in this piece. I'm kind of getting middle grade, young adult vibes. It's hard to say for sure, though, given that we're on just a single page. Yeah. And I'm also not sure what genre or time period we're in. I could take a few guesses, but I would love to have a better idea about the setting and that kind of thing. And I do think the dialogue with her dad could be moved to the second page, and then that would free up some space on the first page to give us that direction in the setting. And I think it would help with the flow as well, because then we can get into Rita's head a little bit more before we bring in our other characters.
Yeah, this submission felt, I want to say, different than the ones we've received so far, and I'm not sure. I don't feel like I was able to put my finger on why in my comments, but I said I was going to try, so here we go. Right off the bat, I got some interesting vibes, and if you remember the movie Flushed Away, I definitely that came to mind, maybe just because the character's name is Rita, but also because of the parkour stuff, which I super liked. The descriptions, like Maria said, were very well done and intriguing, and I especially liked the ones of her moving across the roof into the house. The acrobatics were really fun, and then descriptions of the light were super vivid as well. But similarly, I wasn't sure what we were getting into with this piece. Like the line about the light staring back at Rita made me question if it was like supposed to be a bit creepy, maybe kind of borderline horror, or maybe horror entirely, but the other descriptions so far don't seem to line up with that. So I didn't really have a sense of genre or time period. Middle grade YA feels like a good benchmark based on what Maria has already said. But I mean, I guess it could go either way. It could be adult. I have no idea. And then I couldn't really decide if the dad character was supposed to be creepy as well. Like I got weird vibes from him, namely the line about his smile, being like that it would have looked horrifying on any other face. That confused me a little bit. Like I wasn't sure if we were supposed to like this guy or not. And maybe he's supposed to be mysterious, and that's fine. But I feel like this is just leaning more towards confusing and not quite enough information for it to be a good sense of mystery. And then actually a kind of a goofy note is I'm actually wondering if the characters are cats or if they're human. I'm leaning towards human because of some of the other context, but there was the kitty cat steps descriptor, which is super cute. And I kind of took that literally a little bit. Like I wasn't sure, is this humans or is it cats? I could go either way, I'll be honest.
I would kind of love it if it was cats.
Right?
That would be really cute.
It would be adorable and unexpected and super fun. But yeah. And then what else have I got? Not a whole lot else. I think the strengths of this piece lie in Rita's enthusiasm and how genuine that is when it comes across. But then what I felt was missing from this overall was, that sense of direction, that why, that what's pushing the story forward, and where actually are we? So I had like a bunch of questions, like what was she doing on the roof? What was her dad doing out in the yard? Is she planning to go after the light and see what it is? Or is she just happy to talk about it with her dad? Like, I think more hints towards some of this information, either in the first page or later on, might help establish a bit more of that intrigue and give the reader that motivation to read on. But thanks for submitting this one. I really enjoyed the descriptions and the potential for these to be cats. That's always a win for me.
So welcome to Rob. He is the author of The Prisoner of Paradise, which is a wonderful thriller novel that I highly recommend. We met through Bookstagram, and I told him I'd get around to his book, and then I ended up binge reading it in like 2 days. So thanks so much for joining us today, Rob. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, Maria and Elise, thank you so much for having me on the show. Mm-hmm. I am super grateful. I'm really happy to be here. I can't wait to chat with both of you. And so my name is Rob Samborn. My first book is called The Prisoner of Paradise, which, as Maria mentioned, is an historical thriller. I can go into it if you'd like. And so I live in Denver with my wife and daughter, and I'm originally from New York. But I moved to Denver about 3 years ago by way of LA, where I lived for about 20 years.
Nice. LA is really awesome. That sounds pretty cool. But Colorado is supposed to be gorgeous, so haven't been yet.
You're both in Vancouver, right?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So it's pretty nice up here as well, minus, like the housing market, that kind of thing.
I've never been, but I've always wanted to go.
It's it's really gorgeous. We're lucky we have mountains and the sea, and it's really nice. We do love it up here.
Okay.
Right.
I think we have plenty to cover. We have a bunch of questions from listeners. We reached out on social media and kind of asked, like, what do people want to know? So that's always fun. This is a community effort, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I think we can just dive into the first question if everyone's ready to go.
Ready.
So let's start with, do you ever get used to being a published author, or does it still feel unreal?
It still kind of feels unreal, but I think I've gotten used to that unreal feeling, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So my book came out on November 30th, and it's been less than a year. And, for the listeners who don't know about The Prisoner of Paradise, I'll just tell you a little bit about it. Sure. So The Prisoner of Paradise is a dual timeline thriller that follows two American tourists who travel to Venice, Italy on vacation. So when the husband comes to believe that his true soulmate is not his wife, but a woman whose soul has been imprisoned in the world's largest oil painting, she's concerned for his mental well-being, but he's convinced that all of this is real. And he goes on a quest and discovers a religious order that over hundreds of years has figured out a method of extracting people's souls from their bodies, which they then imprison in this gigantic painting called Paradise. And the main character has a number of flashbacks to a previous life as a 16th century swordsman. And let's just say that some stuff went down back then. And now, 6 lives later, he's desperate to save her, his soulmate. And there's also kind of a love triangle going on as well. But meanwhile, there are thousands of souls trapped in this painting, all of which this order claims are evil, including his soulmate. And so freeing one means liberating all of them, and the order will never let that happen. So that's what the book is about. And yeah, so it came out on November 30th. It's been less than a year, but my audiobook just released a couple of weeks ago, and my second book is coming out October 25th. I'm also releasing a novella next month. So it's kind of like between all of that, there's kind of like this flood, so it helps me getting used to it. What I haven't gotten used to is the publishing industry, which we can chat about, or that could be a whole other episode.
I feel like that can be an entire episode mostly about the publishing industry, which I have like a million questions about, and it is. But I'm excited for book 2. I hope we get more flashbacks because I really love those chapters. They were great. Love that. So my next question. So was it your first novel, The Prisoner of Paradise, or how many did you write before this one?
This was indeed my first novel, but I come from a screenwriting background, so that's kind of where the bulk, I guess I could say, of my writing education, my professional writing education really comes from. So I wrote 9 scripts, 5 of which were optioned, and I even wrote this originally as a script and then adapted it into a book. So it, as a screenplay, it was optioned by a production company founded by DreamWorks execs. Unfortunately, it was never made into a movie, but when the rights reverted back to me, I decided to adapt it into a book. So at the time, it was the only book I had written.
I feel like this would translate so well on screen. Like, I think it would make a really good movie. I would watch it.
Or TV series. Now I want it to be a TV series.
TV series would be good too. So this was the book that got you an agent then. So when you were querying, I might be repeating, and that's later on, but how many agents did you query before you got one?
I don't recall the number, but it was a lot. It was dozens. It was probably about, maybe 40, 50 or 60 or so. It took a while. Yeah. So it was a long process. But actually, I should also say that there were a few agents who did offer me contracts, but I decided that I didn't love them for whatever reason, and then ended up signing with the agent who I'm with now, who I do love.
Oh, wow.
Okay. That's interesting because I think a lot of writers who have been in the querying trenches for a long time are like, I will take whatever agent wants my work. But you didn't do that. And that was the choice for you, it seems.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I can see that being tough though. You're like, I finally got an agent.
Yeah.
Should I just say yes?
Yeah, and I had to grapple with that decision myself. But fortunately, if I remember correctly, this was a kind of long time ago at this point, but partly because of the pandemic, everything was delayed at least a year. But I think when it happened, they were all fairly close to each other. When I think I had like 2 or 3 other offers, so I didn't really have to think about it for that long.
Okay.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
I feel like if I thought about it too long, I wouldn't be able to make a decision. It'd be impossible.
It was tough. It definitely was tough.
Would you be able to identify some of the maybe things that pushed you in one direction or another? Or has it been too long?
It was definitely really, I spoke with my current agent and those other potential agents about what their plans were with the book. Also, I looked at, of course, their client list and their success rate with publishers. So it was really a combination of all of that led to my decision. My current agent definitely had a higher track record, you could say, or better track record else for sure. And also, I felt like what they were offering me was a little stronger. They are also kind of managers in a way, and they had a lot of input about the story. A lot of creative input. So if I remember correctly, the other agents didn't have any thoughts about it really as well at all. They were just ready to go. Whereas my current agent actually wanted to make a number of revisions, and we went through probably an additional 2 or 3 rounds of editing, and we're talking major changes.
And that's not even with an editor yet. That's just with the agent, right?
That's correct. Yeah. I did hire an editor separately before I actually queried.
Oh, you did? Okay.
But then I had an editor at my publisher as well.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a lot of, it's a lot of revision.
Yeah, this book has been through the ringer. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody goes through that, but in the, even though it took a longer period of time, I think at the end of the day, the product is a lot better. So I'm really happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah. You can be pretty confident in that. Throughout that process, at what point, or did you have to find beta readers for yourself? How did that work? And then kind of tied to that, we're wondering, someone asked, should those people be strangers, or is it better for them to be people that you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for questions, I should say, those are great questions. And I would say for the first part of it, all of my beta readers have always been people in writing groups. So I've been in a number of writing groups, and I think that really kind of segues into the second question, which is, what I'm comfortable. First of all, I think it should be whatever a person is comfortable with, the writer, right? If you're not comfortable sharing your work with people you don't know, then don't do it. But be ready to do that on a massive scale when your book comes out, and you can't argue with those people. You just got to take the review or whatever it is. So I didn't know the people in the writing groups originally, but I got to know them. So I wouldn't necessarily want to go with friends or family, because you don't necessarily know if they're going to really be honest with you. I mean, family did read my work and they did help. And they were honest, actually, now that I think about it. But I think more from like formatting and grammatical perspectives. But then, then the flip side is, once you're in a writing group, you do get to know those people, and they become friends. But you continue to be honest with each other. You're providing critiques back to them. It's not a one-way thing.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about our writing group. Familiar with each other's writing and what we need to work on, because it's an even playing field. You get really good feedback.
Yeah.
And I did have that same experience. I sent a chapter to my family, and my dad was like, "You spelled something wrong on this paragraph." I'm like, "Thank you." Yeah. That wasn't really why I sent it to you guys, but okay.
But that's still helpful.
It's still helpful. Thanks, Dad. Spell check didn't catch that one, apparently. So yeah, that's that's good to know. But did you have beta readers before you started querying, or was that something that your agent encouraged you to do in the editing process when you were working with your agent, or were you just kind of doing it just the two of you?
It was all before.
Yeah. Okay.
All the beta. So I was in the writing groups working on the book before I started querying, and then also during it. I never really stopped revising and editing.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of afraid you'd say. I'm so tired of revising this one manuscript I haven't, and at least sent me 20 pages of notes on it, and I'm like, I'm gonna get to you sometime, but I'm
one
just
day
not mentally ready. Yeah. One day.
I mean, I'll tell you what. So because it's a series, I regularly go back to the book to kind of read through to make sure that I have consistency across. I was across the whole series and everything, and I go back and read it. And it's a published book at this point. And there are things like, oh man, I wish
Okay, I'm so happy to hear that too, because I always about that. I've been reading the Throne of Glass series right now, and I'm on the second to last book. And if you compare the writing in her second to last book in the series, whatever, 8th book, 7th book it is, to the first book in the series, she's completely different. I'm like, does she look back at that first book and go, man, this is such hot garbage?
I would imagine.
I would
imagine. I mean, I think that I'm a much better storyteller than I am a writer, but I do get a good number of compliments on my writing. But I think that my writing now is vastly superior to my writing with the first book. even in this short period of time. Like, I think my second book is so, like, it's so much better.
Well,
And I'm not knocking my first book. All the listeners out there, you should go out and get it, because it is by far the absolute best book ever written about soulmates in Venice across 2 timelines, written by someone named Rob Samborn. Yeah.
See, we're going off topic, but I have to say one of the things that appealed to me about your book was the soulmates thing, because one of the projects that I have been querying has to do with soulmates and reincarnation and stuff. So that was what attracted my attention to it. So I thought that was really cool. I thought it was really well done. And I love reading the stuff about that. I feel like there's not enough of it out there, but it could just be
Thank you. Well, I'm glad that you liked it.
Yeah. So another question from one of our listeners: what do you consider to be the hardest things about publishing?
Let me go get my list.
The other book you wrote, which is a list. Yeah.
Yeah, really. Well, selling books is probably the hardest. But then also just the glacial speed. And honestly, there are a number of frustrations. So as I mentioned before, I do come from a screenwriting background, and you can literally write and shoot a movie in less time than it takes to get a publisher to read your book. It can really be maddening. I also have on the business side of things, on the money-making side of my career, I also have a sales and business development background. So I'm really used to like hustling in a fast-paced team environment. I would say also the learning curve in the publishing industry is very, very steep. There's just so much to do and so much you're required to do and learn on your own. It's kind of insane. Now, all that said, I do love it. I do love writing books and the process and everything. And there's also a huge, part of the other side of all that I love, which is just, people like yourselves who do incredible podcasts and offer amazing advice on editing and the publishing process and everything, as well as other authors too, who I love as well. The writing community itself is just phenomenal, as I'm sure both of you know. I've become friends with so many authors. I mean, we're talking like dozens of people who I did not know at all.
Yeah.
Everybody is incredibly supportive to one another. There's definitely this feeling of all being in this together. We're all in the same ship together, and a rising tide also lifts all boats. And even though authors are technically competitors, we're also really in it together. So I think that that's great.
I really love that about the writing community too. Like, that's what I've noticed. Like, when we started our Bookstagram account, it was actually just meant to be to promote the podcast, which is like the last thing I do on it. Oops. But I've met so many readers and writers, aspiring writers, like, indie authors, and it's crazy how supportive everybody is. Like, most industries are not like that. Having been in horses, for example, like most of my life, there's not a lot of that. It's competitive there, but not supportive in a lot of ways. Whereas in the writing community, everybody's like, if you post on Twitter that you've got a full request, you'll get like 200 people being like, that's awesome. Like, it's so nice. I love that about it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if you look at something like sports, whether it's equestrian or really any sport, unless you're on the same team, obviously there's good sportsmanship and, people aren't going to get hurt or something like that, but you are competitors. You may not be like helping out with a specific technique or something like that, but people do.
Yeah, you definitely aren't like, oh no, when they make a mistake, like, yes, I probably won now.
Yeah, I would say I have met and connected with a lot of people I never would have expected to, just from like being online and saying, hey, I write, you write too? Cool. And that kind of just tumbles into this massive writing community. Is very, very beautiful. And I think that's partially what inspired us to do this, just connecting with other people. And I mean, I think from a amateur marketing perspective, not posting about the podcast on the podcast account is probably the best thing you can do for your social media. If you're constantly plugging your own thing, that can get pretty draining pretty fast. So
it can.
Yeah, I think the other pages where every post is a promotional post, I'm like, people don't want to. Yeah. They don't always want to see that. That's too much. It's nice to post, your work obviously and your own promotion, but if every single post is promotional, then you just kind of, people are going to be like, well, I'm going to unfollow that because I get enough ads.
And honestly, that is one of the hardest things about publishing, you know, it is you have to do it. And it is draining, and then even just being creative with it to try and vary it, so it's not always the exact same thing, or it gets to be a lot.
Yeah, there's got to be some secret formula, but it was just got yet.
The secret formula is money.
Yeah, there you go.
I feel like that's the secret formula.
Yeah, it is, exactly. It's the secret formula. It's paid advertising, and then also paying other people to do your marketing for you or manage, you know, anything, right? And write your books for you. But seriously though, you know, that money helps. Who knew?
So how much time would you say, like, how much of your time is dedicated to writing versus the rest of the publishing journey, like marketing and stuff like that?
Okay.
Would you say you get to write more, or do you have to market more?
So it really depended upon when the book was coming out versus kind of now. And so leading up to the release, so The Prisoner of Paradise was released on November 30th of last year. And I would say for a good 2 or 3 months up to that point, and then for probably a good 6 months or so after that, it was honestly probably like 80% marketing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was really a lot. But again, you know, I do come from a sales background, so I really wanted to hustle and push it out as much as possible. And, you know, going back to what we were talking about with the writing community, you know, authors don't consider each other competitors. However, we really are. And if you think about, you know, like if you go into a bookstore as a buyer, as a reader, you are accosted with literally probably 100,000, if not more, different things to choose from, right? Even if you're going in there to buy a specific book that's, let's say, like fantasy romance, you may be, you know, your eyes may be caught to a nonfiction book about a musician or who knows what it is, right? And there's just a limited amount of books that people can buy. So how do you get your name out there? How do you rise, not rise above, but like just rise above all the noise? And I'm not saying those people are noise, but like there's a lot of it out there, especially on, you know, on Amazon too. It's just on any one book page, there's probably pictures of about 25 or 30 other books.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of that. I would say as a debut author with a mid-size press, have been relatively successful, I guess you could say. And then, but I did want, you know, as we were talking about before, it does get draining. It's a lot. And not only that, like I really not only wanted to focus on my other books, I had to. So I was writing the second book. The second book has been done for a while, but the bulk of it was probably done before the first book even came out.
Okay.
And so now I'm working on the third book, and I'm also releasing a spin-off novella. It's really kind of a companion novella. So Mireille, I think you said that you love the historical scenes in the book. This novella, it's going to be about 140 pages. It's coming out in September. It's called The Swordsman of Venice, and it's entirely historical fiction. So we follow the character from the past, Angelo. We follow his journey after he's forced to flee Venice with people chasing.
Okay, I'm going to read that like immediately. That's what I want.
Thanks. So finally, long answer to your question. Now I'm probably doing about 90% writing and 10% marketing. But with these other books coming out very, very soon, I need to transition that to kind of the flip side very quickly.
Kind of back to the writing community conversation, if you could offer advice to other querying writers like ourselves, what would you say?
Yeah, so having gone through it for a pretty long time, as I mentioned, in waves with different agents and everything, I would say the first thing right now is to stop right now and just kind of reassess. You know, one is, and I'm saying all these things generally without knowing the author or how far they are into the process or everything, but like ask yourselves, like, one, has your book been professionally edited? And I don't mean did you send it to a friend or a beta reader who's really good as an editor. Did you actually pay someone? And if not, I think do it. It's worth it. It's an investment. Two, do you really know your genre? I think that this is critical when querying to like really, really know that genre and nail it. The other day, I was talking to a writer who is in the querying process actually, and when he told me about his book, before he went into the synopsis, he said it was a fantasy, sort of like Lord of the Rings. And then when we got to it, it's not fantasy at all, but actually a historical thriller. So some of mine actually, and this is really important not only for pitching, but also to whom you're pitching, which I think brings me to the next one, which is 3, which is make sure you're querying an agent who reps your genre and follow their submission guidelines to a T. And then also don't just blast everyone out there, even, like thinking like, oh, they don't rep my genre, but maybe they'll like it. It's like, imagine owning an ice cream parlor and, calling them up to order a pizza. They're both food, but no, you can't do that. And that brings me to the next one, which is don't blast. Send in waves, maybe 5 or 10 tops, and then revise and revise again. Join Absolute Right. I don't know if either of you are familiar with it or if the listeners are familiar with it, but it's basically a message board. Look up Absolute Right, post your query on that, and they're basically beta readers for queries, but they have like a whole bunch of different message boards. It's sort of like Reddit for writing.
Cool.
That's amazing.
It is. Yeah. And it's really good and helpful, and it's really important to nail the query letter, because your query letter is a representation of not only your book, but you as an author. So the body should be a maximum of about 250 words, which is roughly the word count for a page, and spelling counts. I've heard a lot of agents say this, that if you have an error in 250 words on one page, why wouldn't they think that there's an error on every single page of the book, right? And then it's like, is the agent thinking, okay, they can't be bothered, the author can't be bothered to proofread, so why would they bother representing them? And then in that 250 words, make sure to include a hook, your main character, your antagonists, stakes, goals, urgency. Definitely stakes, goals, and urgency. I actually help out a lot of people with query letters. I think I'm fairly good at it. And I can't tell you how often it's just completely missing stakes, goals, and urgency. And by the way, it does not need to be an action or thriller book to have those. It could be a total drama or romance, or anything, but still have stakes, goals, and urgency. And then finally, read in your genre. Check out the top sellers on Amazon. Make sure that you're familiar with what's out there and be looking forward, by the way. So go on to NetGalley as well and look to see what's coming out. So you're familiar with it, because that's what the agents are also, they're working on stuff that they're being pitched, but they're also working on stuff that's coming out in the future. And then go back, edit. Also get your website and social media accounts up now. And then I also think, going back to the previous question about the industry, is learn the industry as much as possible. This is something I did not do that I wish I did. But there's just so much. And then once you do sign, once you have a release, they definitely join a debut group for that year.
Okay, I love all this advice. I also that you recommended for people to read in their genre, because I saw a Twitter thread the other day. They're like, do you read in the genre that you write in? And someone to comment like, well, not really a reader. I just write. And I was like, well, yeah. I think I saw that. Like I kind of don't get good advice from that, because how are you supposed to become a good writer if you're not like studying?
Yes.
And I've talked to an agent a couple years ago at one of the writing conferences, and I had pitched to her my fantasy romance, which was the first one I wrote. That's not great. And she said to me, like, what about your story is going to make an agent look twice? And that's why the query is so important, and having the stakes and the motivation and everything like that. But yeah, it's all good advice.
Absolutely. And I think another thing is that people need to remember that this is a business. It's 100% a business, and it's a business first and last, despite how creative you want it to be. And if you don't read in your genre, you're not knowing what's selling. And, going back to my store analogy, it's like, imagine coming up with a food that you just want to sell and you have no idea what's out there and what people are buying and eating. You got to know the competition, whether they're competitors or not, but you need to know the market and the industry.
So did you travel to Venice as research?
Yes, I've actually been to Venice 3 times. So the third trip that I took was specifically as a research trip. So, the vast majority of my research was through the internet and books. Remember those things? But there's no substitute for being there. The smells, the sights, the sounds, the feel of the weather, or even the feel of the building. Seeing little nooks and crannies. I mean, that's for some place like Venice, but I think I would advise anybody, if your book is set in a place where you don't live and you can go there, whether you have the means or it even exists, I would definitely recommend doing that. And, I'm also a big fan of limited deep third person POV. And I think both of you are. I listened to that podcast and I like to go as deep as possible. So I do think it really helps to be there. So it's sort of like, it's kind of first person, but really written as third, because it's like I'm in someone else's head. And I prefer third person as well, just because I'm in someone else's head, but so is the reader. I actually find first person to be unsettling sometimes, but yeah. So yes, so I have been there for research.
I love it. I've been there once before, but I was like 20 and backpacking, and we'd been traveling for like almost 3 months at that point. So I was like, another church, another whatever. So I'd like to redo Venice when I'm not so tired from traveling. I could actually really
I recommend it. Yeah. My first 2 trips were actually when I was also backpacking or studying abroad, really. And but the other thing about Venice, by the way, for all the listeners, is if you haven't been there, you should definitely go, because it's one of the greatest cities on the planet. It's just gorgeous and unique and filled with amazing things.
Yeah, I'm having a little urge to drive around Italy now.
Yes, I always have
a problem.
That travel bug.
Yeah, it's back after a few years off. It's back.
Okay. I guess for me, for the listeners, because I haven't read this book yet, and now I'm feeling like I'm missing out on something huge. So tell us more about that. We'd like to hear more about the writing and querying process for Prisoner of Paradise.
Okay. So again, it did take a pretty long time. It was multiple years, but that's because as I was mentioning, I did query. So first of all, for the writing process, that took a pretty long time because I was working at the time. And I do tend to be a bit of a perfectionist. So I was working on making sure I was revising everything. And then the querying process, I did it in waves. And it took a number of years. Now I can say that it gets way better. My second book only took 1 year, and because I have a 3-book deal, by the way, with my publisher. Their name is Touchpoint Press, and because I have a 3-book deal, it's awesome. I'll be honest, I don't have to query, and the writing just got way faster and way better. And my third book will probably only take, I think, about 9 months.
And so the sequel you said is coming out in October?
Yes. So the sequel, and by the way, I'm writing them, all of them will be, you can always read them as standalones. In fact, I think that people will go back to the first one and sort of look at it as an origin story. So the second book is called Painter of the Damned. And this is the cover. I know this is audio, but you both can see it.
I like that cover.
Thank you.
Nice.
This is the Prisoner of Paradise.
Yeah.
So the Painter of the Damned is coming out on October 25th. And then I'm also going to release that novella that I was talking about, which is called The Swordsman of Venice. That'll be coming out towards the end of September. That's just going to be an ebook.
Okay. And my other question, kind of bouncing off this now that we've seen the covers, even though the listeners have not, how much input did you get into the cover design? Because that's something I'm like really obsessed about, and I'd be so upset if I sold my book and then they picked the cover and it was ugly.
I agree with you 1,000%. If that's such a thing. I completely. I mean, going back to the whole business thing that I was talking about, maybe you can't judge a book by its cover, but people definitely
Mhm.
buy books by their covers, or
I do, yeah.
at the very least, you pick it up
Mhm.
based
Mhm.
on its cover, and then you'll go through it, right? If you're in the store, if you're on Amazon, it's definitely starting with cover. So it is the single most, once everything is ready to go, it's the single most important investment you can make. And I'm also extremely picky about it. And
Mhm.
I'll be honest, I didn't love all of the covers that my publisher had put out. So I just took the initiative, and I hired a cover designer to do The Prisoner of Paradise.
Mhm.
So I had 100% input on that. But they were also, I had discussed this with them. I was like, you know what, are you okay with me doing it? And they're like, yeah, fine. If you want to pay for it, do it. So I did do that. Now, for the second book, they had actually hired a cover designer who's fantastic. His name is David Ter Avasian, and he did Painter of the Damned. And I did work with him on it. So I had already known that he was a good designer. And then I gave him like some ideas of what I wanted to do and that kind of thing. So, and then he came back with like 5 or 6 phenomenal different options that honestly were hard to choose from. But ultimately we decided on this one. Yeah.
Okay, I love it. That kind of eases my mind because I am really funny about covers. I mean, I want them to look nice for the bookstagram, and I'm not ashamed to say that.
Hey, yeah, you should. And you know, there are pros and cons to working with a smaller press. So that's definitely one of the pros. With the big 5, I do not think that you can do that. I think maybe you can provide some input, but I think it's pretty limited. Now, that being said, 9 out of 10 times, I think the covers are pretty good.
That's fair. All right. Moving more into a bit of your career. Our next question is, do you write full time? And do you ever regret pursuing it as a career?
So as of today, yes, I do write full time, but I haven't always, as I mentioned before, and also not going to be doing it for much longer. So for most of the time when I was writing The Prisoner of Paradise, I was working full time. So I was writing at nights and during weekends.
Yeah.
But I did. So towards the end of last summer, I decided to take a break and focus full time on that marketing that I was talking about, and also finishing up my second book, Painter of the Damned. But I am going back to work full time on September 1st. So it's going to be interesting. We'll see. If anybody out there has invented a cloning machine, please contact me. I really appreciate it.
Me too.
No kidding.
Gosh. Feels like there's too many things, and I hate having to have a real job to support the fun things that I like to do. It's a real pain in the ass.
There just are not enough hours in the day. I don't really get it.
Then, I feel like I need an assistant.
Yeah, me too. And my assistant is an assistant. I don't have an assistant by any name. So, and I don't regret this career path at all, you know. And also, even the word regret, I don't like using, because every decision you made in the past was informed by your knowledge at the time. Now, if I had a time machine, another thing I made, by the way, I'd increase that knowledge. You know, I was going back to like my advice on querying, for example. I would definitely have spent more time learning in the industry, definitely spent more time revising the work before those first initial rounds of querying as well, to improve my submission drafts earlier in the process.
And so as far as marketing goes, how much support do you get being a traditionally published author? Is your agent kind of guide you a bit with the sales, or because of your background, they kind of just let you fly on your own?
It's definitely more of the latter, but I don't know if agents in general help out with marketing anyway. So mine don't. Who would typically help out with the marketing is the publisher, and this goes back to pros and cons of being with a smaller mid-sized press. You know, when you're with a big 5, they do help a lot more. But when you're with a small to mid-sized press, it's very little. So I really do probably about 99% of everything myself. But I think even with a big 5, you know, unless you're a Stephen King or Dan Brown or whoever, you pretty much also have to kind of do it yourself, especially as a debut author. I think they do help, and I think they'd help also in the beginning, you know, leading up to release and a little bit after release. But again, it's a business. They have a lot of different things to promote, and unless your book is selling like hotcakes, they're probably not going to invest more money into it. So a lot of times it does fall upon the author to do it no matter what.
Okay, that makes sense. And as far as social media goes, where do you think you've had the most success marketing your book on social media? Which platform?
That's a good question. Probably Instagram. I found that Twitter was a little bit better for some reason pre-release, and I think Instagram is better post-release. TikTok, I think, is actually pretty good. But and I do like using it because I think it's kind of fun to make the videos. But this just goes back to like before what I was talking about was like the creative energy of putting time into it, and then also coming up with something new. You know, a lot of people on Book Talk, it's like the same thing every single video.
Yeah,
and it's also stuff that I don't know. Maybe it's just me. You know, I'm not 16, but I'm like, I don't have any interest in hearing an author mouthing over someone else's quote about something. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I think so.
But I do think that TikTok is a fun platform and tool, you know, and if you can get hundreds of people to see it, it still helps, right? So I'm a very, very big believer in brand recognition and awareness. So I think it all helps. So I'm also on Facebook, you know, in fact, so I also do paid advertising on Facebook and Amazon and BookBub. So I've definitely had a lot of success through BookBub, actually. And I think Goodreads is really good. I don't advertise on Goodreads, but I think Goodreads helps, which is a social media platform. And then on Facebook, Facebook is an older crowd, but I think in general, readers do tend to skew older anyway. And you can actually get way better stats on Facebook. You can get on Instagram as well, but it's better than on Twitter and on TikTok. So I know for a fact that the vast majority of people who click on like anything, whether it's a post or a paid ad or anything like that, are 45 and up, and really honestly like 55 and up, and also most like 75% women. Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, because we've had some success with like Instagram ads. That's the only one we've really tried so far. And yeah, I find Twitter's kind of tough because, you know, the doing things pre-release, I think, it does get more attention because people are being really supportive. And then kind of once it comes out, they're like, okay, well, like we already kind of retweeted this a couple of times. Like, something goes on there on Twitter where it just kind of goes silent. Whereas on Instagram, I think there's more readers. And they tend to talk about the book more and like the posts and post about it. Whereas like on Twitter, when you're in the writing community, it's like writers, less readers. That's what I've come across anyway. I know there is like a book Twitter, but I haven't really gone onto that side of it yet.
I use that hashtag. I don't know if it really even helps.
Yeah, I don't think hashtags even help anymore, honestly. Engagement's been so bad on Instagram lately and everyone's complaining about it. And I look at my insights from like a few months ago to now, and I'm like, I don't know what is going on, but it's like half the engagement. So that's the danger of social media, right? It's like you're just kind of throwing things at the wall to see it sticks, I guess.
It is, yeah. But again, you know, like I said, I think brand awareness and brand recognition is huge. And the nice thing about all the social media platforms is that they're free. And still post.
Yeah. I'd like to try and get on Book Talk, but I'm not a big video maker, so we will see how that goes.
Yeah, they're fun. And the other cool thing about TikTok is their music library is insane. They have every single song. It's so good. So there's never been a case where I had a song in mind to put to the video where they didn't have it.
Yeah.
It's so phenomenal. And, you know, pre-TikTok, you would have had to pay the artist for royalties, but you don't have to because they get paid through TikTok. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's crazy.
How things have changed.
They get 1/17 of a cent, but you know, that's why I try to get thousands of views.
It adds up. It adds up.
Right.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to our last question, and that is, what is next for you? For your writing career? Are there any other genres you're interested in trying out? that kind of thing.
Yeah. First and foremost, as I mentioned before, this novella called The Swordsman of Venice is coming out next month. And then October 25th will be the release of Painter of the Damned. And then in 2023, at some point, will be book 3 in this series. And I will also write a second novella to continue the journey. So, and for the readers who are thinking like, my God, he has all these books and novellas, blah, 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 blah. But, think of it sort of like Star Wars in a sense, I guess, where you have the main storyline and then the spin-offs of where we follow some of the other characters. And it is dual timelines, so I can do that. If this particular series is very successful, I actually, even though I have a mechanism I'm planning on closing it out with book 3. I should say I have a mechanism to continue it going. And then the other nice thing is that it is multiple timelines, so I can always pick up a point in the past and keep writing from there. So I might do that. But in terms of other genres, I actually really would love to get into kids' books. So I have a 7-year-old daughter. I think they're a lot of fun. And I have a lot of different ideas. I'm actually working on one concept with her that I think would be really, really cool. And she's actually super into it. I swear to God. Like last night, she's like, I have some ideas I want to ask you questions about. And she like rattled off like all these questions. And I was like, her name is Sienna. I was like, Sienna, did you just think of these off the top of your head, or have you been thinking of these for days? And she's like, I've been thinking of them for days, but I kind of wanted to like think about them longer to make sure that they were good ideas. And I was like, oh, you were letting them cook in your head. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
Wow, that's adorable.
I love that. She's gonna run circles around you.
I know. I will. I hope she does. Man, if I knew what she knows even at 7, I'd already be running in circles around myself. And then I also have, I'd love to write a series of sort of historical thrillers, but they would probably just take place in the present day. But what's different about them is that they would appeal to both young and older audiences. I know I'm being a little cryptic about that, but something that's sort of fun and cool like that appeals to multiple ages.
Okay, that sounds fun. I do like historical stuff, so I would also be reading those, I'm sure. But those all sound really awesome. I love it. It's really good. I'm excited to read the novella, especially. I'll be snatching that up pretty quick.
Well, thank you so much, Maria. I hope you like it. And at least if you read The Prisoner of Paradise, I hope you like it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like...
Sorry, Lisa, I have to put it in her next book stack that I loan her from the library.
Yeah, she's my loaning library. So yes. it'll come my way eventually.
Well, I'd be happy to send it to you as well.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, it sounds like super fun. Did I even read the synopsis before this? I don't think I did. I went in this a little bit blind, kind of learning as the listeners are, and that's been kind of fun. Like, it sounds like a really wild ride. It sounds really cool.
It's really fun. All right. Well, I think that was all we had. Do you have anything else you'd like to add for the listeners or for us before we finish up?
Yeah, so speaking of social media, so my website is robsamborn.com, which is ROBSAM as in Mary, B as in boy, ORN.com. And I'm on like literally every social media platform. Most of my usernames are Rob Samborn as well. I didn't even mention LinkedIn before, by the way, which I think is moderately helpful. The one that I don't think it does anything is Pinterest. I don't know why any of it, I'm not really. Yeah, but and then if people have any questions for me about the querying or publishing process, feel free to reach out. My email address is author@robsamborn.com. And I also want to just thank both of you again so much for having me on your show. I love your show. You guys offer tremendous advice to people. I think what you're doing is fantastic. It's extremely helpful, and everybody should really be listening to your podcast as well.
Oh, well, I'm tearing up.
So
much. My God.
Yeah, I know. I got my cameras off. I got really excited.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has just been our little passion project, but we really love it. Well, I think that's it. So thank you so much for joining us today. And it's such helpful information. I'm really excited actually to review this episode and take my own notes on it. It was great. So yeah, thank you again. And we'll have to see you soon, I guess.
Well, thanks to both of you. Prisoner
Good.
Paradise is available in all formats, but the audiobook came out a couple of weeks ago, which I am super, super excited about. It's narrated by a guy named Zach Aleman, and his reading is just like spot on, perfect. Love it. So that's available through Audible and all audiobook platforms. I want to make sure I didn't forget that. So
Excellent.
yes, but thank you both so much, Maria and Elise. This has been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to speaking with you both again.
And that's the tea on traditional publishing. Don't forget to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at the Tea Grannies Podcast and on Twitter at the Tea Grannies. All links will be in the show notes, and we'll see you next time for a deep dive into self-publishing. Happy writing.